1. I was 18 and living in a big house in a small village with my mom. We had a large garden with a designated area for our 8 rabbits. Every evening we would take turns to go out to feed the animals before it got dark. However, this particular evening, we had arrived home late, so it was already darker than usual. We agreed to feed the rabbits together because it can be quite creepy out in the garden alone at night. I went to the bathroom and told my mom that I would meet her out there in a minute. When I was done, I went straight into the garden where I heard my mom call, "Jess?" As she heard the door close behind me, I answered yes, and saw her upper body pop up from behind the trampoline to make sure it was me. There were no outside lights. However, the combination of the moon, stars, and distant low light of the motorway was enough to illuminate the area to be able to see quite clearly. I was only around 10 meters or so from her, so I could see her face and her very distinct big curly blonde hair. She said okay and bent back down behind the trampoline to continue feeding the rabbits. I looked down at the grass as I made my way to the bottom of the garden, as to not step in any holes dug out by the rabbits during their runaround time. As I made my way down, I spoke to her about how naughty one of the rabbits was acting that day. It took me no longer than 7 seconds to get to the rabbit area. As I approached behind the trampoline where the rabbits' hutches were, I looked up and expected to see my mom standing there as I had just seen and spoken to her a few moments before. She wasn't there. I looked around for a few seconds thinking she might be hiding in order to give me a playful scare, when to my horror I heard the back door of the house close. I looked up quickly and saw my mom walking out into the garden. I immediately speed-walked up that garden towards her so fast with total terror in my eyes. She asked me what was the matter and I explained to her. "Jesus Christ, I'm never going down there again. I just saw you and spoke to you, and by the time I got down there you were gone." She looked at me wide-eyed and assured me that she had been in the kitchen getting her shoes on. She is not skeptical at all about these kinds of things, and from the look on my face, she could tell I had experienced quite a scare, so she believed me straight away. So we were both quite nervous about going back down there. However, the rabbits needed feeding, so we had a nervous laugh and cautiously went down to feed the rabbits together. We had a look around, and there was nothing there. I don't know who or what I spoke to in my garden. Maybe it was a glitch in the Matrix, and my mom from another timeline appeared to feed my rabbits. Or perhaps there were some darker forces at work that night. I read a little about doppelgangers, and how some people recognize them as a warning of death. Not long after this incident, half of my rabbits dropped dead within a few days of each other. 2. One night, during the early 2000s, I saw the same kids run past my building 2 nights in a row. The second time it happened, it felt like I was watching an instant replay. They had on similar clothes, which were inappropriate for the season. It was winter and these kids were dressed for summer. I found it odd that they weren't wearing jackets over their t-shirts, and it was also strange that they were running around by themselves so late at night. It was around midnight when it happened both nights. I'm not good at guessing children's ages, but think they might have been around 10 years old, and they were both boys. The fact that they were too young to be out there alone so late at night is the most important thing to remember. The first night I saw them, I had just gotten home, and was just about to enter my building. I was a young woman that lived in the big city and did not feel safe walking alone that late at night. I'd parked my car nearby and would then rush inside my building, holding my keys in my hand the whole time. But I paused outside the entrance and had a WTF reaction to seeing those kids. I watched them until they ran out of my view. There was no one else around, so they weren't being chased. I thought that maybe they were rushing to get home, since they stayed out too late and must live nearby. Perhaps I could have done more to intervene, but like I said, I didn't feel safe standing alone on the streets so late, and just wanted to get inside. Also, this happened in the early 2000s, so I probably didn't have a cell phone with me. The next night, my boyfriend of the time saw them too. We were in his car and parked outside my building when the second sighting happened. I wasn't expecting to see those kids again, and we were a young couple in love that didn't want to part for the night. This happened during a time that I was living with my parents. I was in college then, so I didn't have a curfew. But when my boyfriend dropped me off late, he couldn't come upstairs, hence why we sat in his car for a while. We had been talking and listening to music. I even remember that London Calling by The Clash was the album playing on his tape deck then. When we saw those same two kids run by my building again, I'm pretty sure that I told him that I'd also seen those kids the night before, since we were both stunned by their presence. Then I had him drive around the neighborhood to see if we could catch up with those kids. I wanted to talk to them, even though I didn't know what I'd say. But when we turned the corner that had caused them to disappear from our sight just minutes before, and then circled the surrounding blocks multiple times, we couldn't find them. If I only saw them once, it still would have been a bit strange. But the fact that they reappeared the next night around the same time, and it was too late for such young kids to be out alone, wearing similar clothes that weren't right for the time of year, and ran in the same direction both times, making the second time it happened feel like an instant replay, gave me the impression that it wasn't a natural occurrence. I never saw them again after that night, but have wondered if it was a glitch in the Matrix, or if I was briefly seeing into another dimension. Or maybe they were just bad kids that like to sneak out of their parents' homes and run around late at night. That last explanation is obviously the most plausible, but it's not what I believe. Everything about the whole situation just seemed totally off. 3. First, I want to explain the significance of crows in my life. Ever since I was about 14 to 16, I have noticed crows as my spirit guides. I had a religious revelation, solitary pagan, and started to notice them. Before that, they were just random wildlife in my hometown that I really didn't feel one way or another about. But after I had this spiritual eye-opening experience, I saw them everywhere. Often when I'm driving, they will be flying in the same direction or crossing the road. I'll drive for 30 minutes, turning different directions, and they will always be crossing even though I've turned a bunch of times. I know it sounds dumb, but it doesn't make sense for them not to just fly straight to where they're going, and therefore not end up intersecting me multiple times. But it is a sign that I'm on the right path, or that things are safe. I know this because the first time, when I was 18 or 19, that they flew in large numbers, and multiple times after multiple turns in the road, in the opposite direction I was traveling, I had my first car accident and wrecked my car. That confirmed the significance of their direction to me. It was the same with when I forgot my wallet at work, and they cawed obnoxiously at me until I figured it out. Now I just listen to them, and if they fly against me, I either don't do what I was thinking about doing at the time, change the path I use to my destination, or something along those lines. Because I trust them, and I'm sure whatever the hell they are warning me about has been avoided. Believe me or not, but I am about 28 now, and they have been pretty consistent. And I'm not an idiot. I know not everything they do is for me. They have their own lives and other people to look after. For example, I live close to a crow's nest now, and when they're hollering outside my window, it's 90% of the time just them communicating with each other. Warnings are more urgent and persistent sounding. I'm a lover of science, have an associate's and applied science degree, and work in a laboratory, so I don't consider myself a total wackadoo. Just a spiritual person who sees what the gods and goddesses and guys want to show me. Now for the main event. So I was working full-time as a manager at a party store in a strip mall while looking for a job fresh out of college, and had been there for a year or two. The local crows are pretty familiar with me because I often leave them food offerings near my car when I work the morning shift, so we have a pretty good and trustworthy relationship. This is also where they told me about my forgotten wallet. In said strip mall is a local chain coffee shop, and I would get a drink nearly every day. After working a morning shift, I got off work and thought I'd frequent my favorite place and get my drink before going home. Totally normal. I leave the store and make it a few steps on the sidewalk when I see a crow out of the corner of my eye. By this point in my life, my eyes are trained to find them wherever they are. I turned to look at it directly, as usual, and I watched it blip out of existence behind a light pole. My mind paused for a moment in shock. This is a parking lot and street I have looked at for over a year, and know like the back of my hand. It's the sidewalk in front of the strip mall, about 6 rows of closed car parking, a patch of grass on a hill, and the street. The light pole is at the end of the parking lot before the grass, but tall enough to tower over the street at the top of the small incline behind it. Now that is a skinny-ass light. Even the ones closest to me are not wide enough to obscure the body of a crow on the ground, let alone one in mid-flight. 1 millisecond she was soaring in a downward path diagonally from about 3/4 up the pole, and just never came out the other side. Her speed was what I would consider normal for a crow coming in for a landing, but after her left wingtip passed behind the pole, it never emerged on the other side. The rest of her body went with it. I stared confused. My eyes followed her obvious flight path and saw nothing. It was a perfectly sunny day, so there were no issues with the light. She had been in the space between the road and the light, above the grass, so she was pretty close to the pole, and, logically, would have landed near the light's base. There were no crows on the ground. No other crows in the vicinity, though they tend to travel in groups of 3 or more. She wasn't above it, she wasn't in the street, she wasn't in the trees or anywhere I could see her. My mind whirled and I panicked. My well-educated scientific brain was unable to process what I had just seen. It made no sense. I'm not sure how long I stood there by the door to the coffee shop. Just that it was abnormally long, and I probably looked like a crazy bitch staring off into the distance and not moving for a long time. After I exhausted all of the ability I had to problem-solve from that vantage point, I sent a rambling text to my sister about what I had just seen, went to my car and left the parking lot, glancing frequently in the direction of the pole. Desperately hoping that I would see the crow just chilling on the ground, looking for bits of food like normal, I even drove on the road on the other side of the light post and looked some more. Nothing. When I came home, I searched the internet, hoping for some kind of similar experience, or maybe some old Native American legend about crows being time travelers or interdimensional beings. Anything to explain what I had just seen, and came up empty-handed. So what about you? Has anybody else seen crows vanish? Or have you heard stories about crows that include time travel, other dimensions, pocket dimensions, invisibility, or any other crazy conspiracy-sounding bullshit that would even kind of explain how a crow with an average wingspan of like 3 feet can fly behind an approximately 6-inch wide pole and never come out of the other side? Help, please. It's been nearly a decade, and it still makes me uncomfortable to think about it. 4. So just for a bit of backstory, we're a young couple living in Australia. My partner and I have a 2-year-old son and a 3-month-old daughter together. I'm not an expert of the unknown, that's for sure, but since I'm a stay-at-home mum, I have been at home a lot of the time recently due to COVID, and my partner works away some weeks, so I find myself reading a lot in my spare time. I've always been a big reader since a very young age, and have always had a fascination with the unknown, educating myself on quantum theory and quantum physics, as well as other topics such as past lives, the paranormal, mythology and folklore, religions from all different cultures, spirituality as well as healing and psychic abilities, kundalini manifestations, starseeds and empaths, and the rising of the Schumann resonance, the apparent fact that the Earth is ascending into the 5th dimension, and all that jazz. So in short, what I'm saying here is I like to think I'm pretty well educated on certain things. I have a very open mind and continue to learn every day. I'm just putting things into context so you know that I've considered many possibilities and just can't explain what's happened to us, rather than the idea that it was a glitch in our reality. Over the years since a child, my intuition has grown immensely, and this will also come into the story later. So, cutting this shorter and getting straight to the point, I live with both of my children and their father. We lived in a cute little 2-bedroom cottage-style house at the time, before we upsized a few weeks later, and yes, we had a glitch happen in both houses. Anyway, The first occurrence was when in June my daughter was a month old. It was a normal afternoon, about 4 p.m., and I was in my bedroom going through our daughter's cupboard looking for a pair of matching socks for her to wear after her bath. At this time my partner was getting her bath ready, and her son was with him in the bathroom. Now, we all know what socks are like. We all have heard of the sock monster that steals your socks, which results in never finding them again. This isn't a strange occurrence, especially considering newborn baby socks are tiny and can go missing in an instant. But this wasn't the normal case of the missing sock, my friends. Oh no. This all happened very quickly, but I remember it very vividly because I got extremely frustrated and couldn't fathom how something could just vanish in front of my eyes like that. So what happened was, I had both socks in one hand, and I was closing the drawers with the other. Just for detail, I'll mention that there was a towel sitting on top of the tall boy cupboard, which was roughly the height of my waist. One of the cupboards got jammed and wouldn't close, so in a split second, I obviously decided to put the socks that were in my hand on top of the cupboard next to the towel so I could use both hands to get it shut. So I do so. But the strangest part is that before I placed them there, a tiny, very quick voice in my head said, "Don't put them there." I don't know if this was my intuition or what, but of course I was already putting the socks down at this point, so it was too late. Now, I'm not joking when I say they disappeared right in front of my face. I didn't even move my head to look away. I literally shifted my eyeballs slightly to the left, and one of the socks vanished. I'd seen it fade out of the corner of my right eye right then and there. I put my eyes focused back on where I put the socks, where only one sat. So I went on a wild goose chase for this sock. Best believe I searched for the sock high and low. I moved the towel, looked under it, and shook it out. I emptied out all of the drawers, wondering if I'd accidentally put one back. I even went as far as getting my partner to come in and help me move not only the cupboard, but every item of furniture in that room to see if it had fallen behind or underneath something, but nothing. It was nowhere. It was just gone. I was talking to my partner about this for days. We were both so confused. But a few days later, when he was at work, I walked into the bedroom, and to my surprise, clear as day, I see the missing sock in the middle of the room it went missing in, about a meter in front of the cupboard. I can't even tell you how quickly I ran my partner. It was incredible. They were a pair again. And now for the second instance, which happened in the first week of living in our new place. Literally a month or so after the first occurrence in the previous house. Our new place is a 2-story house with air conditioning and a lot more room, much more appropriate for a growing family, so we were really excited to get here. Anywho, we were organizing the new house and had a vase we wanted to put into one of the shelves downstairs in the kitchen. It's a shelf that's built into the wall, and there's 3 on top of each other about 30 centimeters apart. My partner went to put the vase on the second shelf, but the vase was too tall. He tried many times. I'd seen him try because I really wanted it there in that particular spot, so he obviously tried as hard as he could, but it was too tall by a few centimeters. So I said, whatever, and put it on the top shelf where it fit. Anyway, he was away at work again, and the vase was really annoying me with where it was placed. I was looking at it and just had an urge to move it. Just for the simple fact that it would have looked so much nicer in the middle shelf, sitting with our other decorative items. It just would have been more aesthetically pleasing, you know? Even though I remember seeing my boyfriend trying to put it in there and seeing him fail, I tried anyway. So I went to move the vase and voila! It fit perfectly in the middle shelf, so as I do, I rang my partner excitedly to let him know. And this one really blew him away, more so than the first one. Mainly because he witnessed this one. It wasn't just me claiming that something went missing. For all he knew, I could have been hiding the sock to play a joke on him, which of course I wasn't, but this was an accusation of his when it happened, because obviously that would be logical. But this was big because it couldn't be explained. They're built into the wall, you cannot move them. The shelves lifted to leave just enough room for my vase to fit. It was incredible how he carried on about it when he got home that afternoon. He kept taking the vase in and out of the shelf and kept saying, "Wow, Something really happened here because that did not fit. What happened? Was this a glitch? Did I manifest more space in that shelf? We didn't have any earthquakes or anything. The foundations of the house are solid, and the other shelves are still the same space apart. So it wasn't just the middle shelf that shifted. It was all three of them. And there you have it. Please tell me your thoughts, and thanks for listening. And if you could in any way explain it rationally, please be my guest. I'm always open to new ideas. Although I've explored every possibility in my eyes, someone else may be able to provide us with a logical answer. Thanks all. Here's to 2020. It's been a crazy year for sure. 5. This is the first experience I've had that I'm completely stumped on. If it were just me, I probably would have hesitantly come to the conclusion that I'm not remembering the situation correctly, but I have a witness. Okay, this is a story about my phone. I'll admit misplacing a phone is not a subject that would normally pull me in as a listener, but I'm asking you to stick with me here. So last week, my kids and I were visiting my grandmother. We all packed into my van to go out to dinner. I realized as we were sitting in the driveway that I had left my phone inside. G hands me her keys so that I can let myself in to get my cell. I lock the door back up, hop into my car, hand over the house keys, and plug my phone into the charger. I tell G it took me a minute to find my phone because it had fallen between the cushions on the couch. Fast forward 20 minutes and we're at the restaurant. I go to grab my phone and it's not in my purse. I'm thinking to myself, I must have left it in the car by mistake. And don't think too much about it for the rest of our meal. We leave the restaurant a short while after. As we get into my van, I realize my phone isn't plugged into the charger anymore. Now this worries me at first. See, my van's rear passenger door doesn't lock right now. So as I'm rummaging through my purse and checking under the seats, I'm hoping it wasn't taken. G left her phone back in the house so she can't call it to help me find it. It was raining, so I decided to just get back to her place and log onto iCloud via her laptop in order to track it down. We get back, and I make a beeline for the computer. I'm logged in, and I see the phone is pinging at her house. I'm relieved that I hadn't left it at the restaurant, and that it hadn't been stolen. I obviously lost it somewhere in the van, right? So I set the alert off. And for those who have never lost your iPhone or use an Android, it causes your phone to beep so you can locate it. I'm heading towards the front door, towards my van, but I stop. I can hear the beeping, but it sounds like it's coming from the back of the house. Surprised, I look at G and the kids who have been sitting with me in the front room since returning home. My oldest runs to the back of the house and comes back out with my phone, proclaiming she found it in the bathroom. I'm beyond confused at this point, and as I'm going over what I remember out loud, G tells me she watched me plug my phone in when I got back to the van. Hell, I made a specific trip inside before leaving the house to go get my phone and told G where I had found it as she watched me plug it in. I just do not understand how my phone could have ended up in the back of the house. There's no way my kids are messing with me either, ages 8 and 5, because even if they hid my phone from me up to the point of returning home, they had no way of getting the phone to the back of the house. They were with G and me in the front room the entire time. Misplacing your phone is pretty mundane, but the fact I cannot explain where I found it is really bothering me. I've had strange things happen to me in my almost 30 years of life, but I've always been able to explain it away to some degree. I've never had an experience that I cannot justify with logic. Anyways, if you made it this far, thanks for listening. 6. Context. For the past few months, I've been taking a walk every evening just to try to lose some weight. I'm not much of an athlete, and I'm just not fit enough to jog daily, so I stick to my personal poor man's power walk, keeping at a pace of around 7 kilometers per hour. Pretty boring stuff, I know, but it will be relevant in a minute. I always follow the same path, a pretty crowded track running along a nearby river, stretching roughly 3 to 5 kilometers. A larger bridge crosses the river just where the track ends, while 2 smaller ones lie 400 meters and 600 meters before. I hold those bridges as checkpoints, depending on how late it is. I either run around at one of the smaller ones and get back, or go all the way to the larger bridge, i.e. the end of the track, before reverting my course. Today I got past the first bridge and stopped at the second one to look at my phone. It was 1853, so I definitely had to turn around there if I wished to be at home by dinner time. 7:20 p.m. While considering this, I looked right in front of me. A young couple was strolling along a path very lazily at around 20 meters from me. Same direction as me, hence I could not see their faces. He was wearing some hipstery white fedora hat, a pink shirt, and khaki short pants. She was wearing a short white fancy skirt and a blue top. Both her clothes and haircut strikingly reminded me of a girl I once knew. Admittedly, she got the most beautiful eyes in my high school. I briefly considered keeping walking past them just to check if she was indeed the girl I knew. Then I realized it would have been pretty awkward to do so, and then turning around right in front of them both, so I shrugged it off and turned my back on them, getting back along the track at my usual 7 kilometers an hour speed. Some 15 minutes later, I was getting back to the starting point of the track when I saw in front of me a dog pup being cuddled by bystanders along the track. I got there to take a peek and I froze in disbelief. The very same young couple I saw before, strolling along in the opposite direction, was now greeting the cute puppy right in front of me. I could now see their faces. The girl was not the one I thought of before, but they were definitely the couple I had just seen minutes before. I am not one to look at other people's clothes intently, but her resemblance to the girl I once knew and this particular hipster look couldn't possibly fool me. I could swear they were indeed the same people. I just stood a couple of minutes looking at them leaving the track, which starts and ends 200 meters from there. Very lazily, not a single drop of sweat over their fancy clothes. I finally got back on track, still puzzled, and got home by 20 past 7. The puppy encounter can't have been later than 10 past 7. I must stress this, even not taking into account the remarkable difference in walking pace. There's no way on earth they could have turned back and got past me on the track without me noticing. Even them getting into a car at the bridge end of the track, walking past me on the road, and stepping back into the path just in front of me, which does not make any sense, but still, simply isn't feasible. So there are no ways in or out of the path between the aforementioned bridges and the other end of the track. I guess it could have, theoretically, taken a car at the end of the bridge, driven down to the road at the opposite end, stepped back 200 meters into the path, for no apparent reason, and casually met a joyful puppy, before turning around and getting back to the theoretical car again. But it just makes no sense. Hoping for some reasonable or intriguing explanations, y'all. 7. I have my ears stretched and wear different jewelry in them all the time. But I had this default pair of flexible black silicone tunnels that I would wear day to day because they were the most comfortable, breathable, and easy to manage, as opposed to my other metal and glass etc. ones that required a bit more maintenance. I had one pair like this, and I would wear them almost daily for 4 years or so they were pretty beat up, little chunks missing, that I would flip to the back so you wouldn't notice when I was wearing them, but quite visible when they were out of my ears. It's not unusual for these types of earrings to fall out sometimes, like when I'm tossing and turning in the night. They can fall out on my pillow, or even sometimes when I'm changing they can snag on my clothes. I always notice pretty shortly after it happens, and find it and put it back in, no problem. Sometimes, if they're out of my ear for too long, like overnight, they're hard to get back in because my ear starts to shrink pretty quickly. One night, I was at a concert where it was pretty close quarters with others, dancing, jumping, etc., and my black silicone tunnel came out of my ear. I noticed a few seconds after, but there was no way I could find it in the middle of a concert, dark and crowded, etc., so I just kinda left it. I went to the bathroom to check to see if it had miraculously fallen into my clothes or hair or something and not on the floor out there. Nope, nowhere to be found. I went to a friend's house after the show where she had just bought some metal plugs, the same size as mine, and loaned me one of those so that my ear wouldn't shrink up like it does. I wore that one until I got home the next day and replaced it with one of my newer ones. I returned the earring to my friend, sterilized, don't worry, the following Monday and went about my life as usual. It was my birthday around that time, and one of the things I had gotten came in the box with a plastic window on it. I had taken the gift in and out of the box many times that week to play with it and put it back. It was a puzzle thing. But on the Wednesday, the box was on the floor of my bedroom, empty, and I saw a little black thing inside, through the plastic window. Could it be? I trusted black silicone tunnel. I picked it up, and sure enough, it was the right size, material, everything. But the difference was, it was in brand new condition, no chunks missing, perfectly clean and pristine. Like I said, there was no way it could have come home from the show with me. I checked at the time, and it wasn't on me. I had been to 2 separate houses, changed clothes, and slept before returning to my house. I only ever owned 1 pair of these earrings. I had been in and out of that box multiple times. And even if I just somehow brought it home unknowingly and kicked it into the box, that still does not explain the condition it was in, compared to the wear and tear it had from over 4 years of wear. Something glitched in the matrix, and my earring reincarnated to return to me. 8. I was maybe 8 or 9 years old. It was the middle of summer. My mom was in the army, stationed at Fort Campbell, and we lived in base housing that was shaped like a huge square. Every mom could look out their front door and see what the kids were doing in the square. As every other Saturday, all of the kids in the area were outside playing. People were out washing cars, gossiping, barbecue, etc. Myself, my twin sister and brother, along with our neighbor kids, Mark and Stella, were out enjoying the day. Stella had roller skates that I borrowed often. This day was no different. We played, I was in skates, rolling along the sidewalk. There were tons of people and kids outside. I feel like it was early afternoon, 11 or 12 noon. All I remember is that I went from skating on the sidewalk with the sun shining fully to walking up to the sidewalk, and it's now dusk, dark. There are no kids, there are no adults, there is no music, it's just still. I was directly in the middle of the square, meaning there is no way anyone, especially a child, could just have fallen asleep or even been injured without someone seeing them. This was a time where everyone watched out for everyone. No way would someone have just let me lay there. The other extremely odd thing, I have a twin sister. We are 10 minutes apart, with her being the oldest. We are fraternal. We do not look alike at all. Yet totally inseparable. No way my sister would have left me on the pavement without reporting to my mom. Neither my brother. We were too close. I gather myself as much as a child can, and I skate back home, feeling confused and scared because I didn't know how it was night almost. And I just knew my mom was gonna kill me. It was still outside. I was the only thing moving out there. Once I touched the doorknob to go inside, it's like everything snapped back on. Like the switch was clicked on or something. Noise, people talking, etc. The thing that has haunted me about this, I get inside, and nobody has even noticed I wasn't there. Not one person. All I could remember is that it was just daytime, and there should be people outside, or I should have been home. I frantically make my way inside. My mom slightly scolded me for running inside, and to go back upstairs. Go back upstairs. I wasn't even in the house. I go upstairs, and my twin and brother act as if I've just wandered off from our game that we were playing, and now I'm back. Huh. They don't even realize I've been gone. I vaguely remember kids at the house again. That's just how it was during those times. So my mom thinking I was there, I get. But not my twin. No way she didn't miss me. That's how I know something weird took place. I just don't know what. Did I glitch? Did I fall and bump my head and nobody cared enough to check on the child in the middle of the busy square? Where did the day go? I am a twin, but we do not resemble, so my mom wouldn't have confused us in passing. Why didn't my siblings not notice I wasn't there? I'm not spooked by it anymore, but I would like to know what happened to me. Has this happened to anyone else? My sister has no recollection of this. Thanks for your time. 9. Do you ever have dreams of things you've never seen? Or a dream that felt like you were playing some other character's role in an alternative screenplay other than your own life story? I'm not talking about a dream where you're suddenly Harry Potter and now you have to fight the Dark Lord to protect Hogwarts. I'm talking about mundane things, ordinary people you have never seen before, and the apparent feelings you have for said people. I had one such dream last night. Honestly, it stood out to me because it was rather disturbing. For some context, I am a smallish heterosexual female in my late 20s. I live in the US, and I work in the STEM field at our local university. So last night I woke up very anxious. It honestly took me a couple of minutes to regain my bearings and honestly my identity. You see, in my dream, I was very concerned that the bodies of my 2 murder victims would be discovered. That's right, in my dream I had apparently killed 2 people. One was a rather large, like 6 feet, 200 pounds plus, or 1.8 meters and 91 kilograms plus, well-built white male in his mid-20s to early 30s. He was bald, or maybe it was that he had a buzz cut. The details have already faded a bit. The second was his sister. She was thin, pretty, brown hair, and around the same age as him. Honestly, maybe I've seen her before somewhere. She did have the look of a stock footage model. Apparently I had hid their bodies behind one of the walls of the grocery store where I worked. I think they may have been my co-workers. I'm not quite sure the motives behind me killing them. I think it had to do with jealousy. I distinctly remember being upset about my relationship with yet another co-worker at this grocery store going sour. She was a girl in her early 20s, pretty, black, wavy hair, possibly Latina in ethnicity. I think maybe the big white guy has somehow gotten in between us. I don't actually remember killing the sister, but I know that I strangled the guy from behind while at this grocery store after hours. I think I used something. Like, you know those string wood saws they put in survival kits? I think it may have been one of those, or possibly something like a piano wire. Anyway, I somehow managed to overpower this behemoth and kill him, and this is what really made me start to question the dream's narrative. Let's just say it would take some intense years of martial arts and strength training for someone like me to pull that off. In fact, this was my first rationalization when I finally surfaced back into consciousness. There is no way I could have killed those people that way. I'm not strong enough. I'm also not involved in a love triangle with some college-age Latina girl and this meathead dude. Nor do I work at a grocery store or harbor any homicidal desires. The whole narrative just felt so real and made much more sense than a regular dream. Like the logic of cause and effect was fully coherent. It felt like I was reliving the memories of some guy, like maybe the boyfriend or unrequited lover of the Latina girl. Does anyone know if this fits the plot of a TV show that maybe I picked up on, but didn't really consciously pay any attention to? Or taking a turn down to Crazy Lane, did I actually dream about someone else's memories? 10. My nephew is enrolled in virtual classes this school year due to the pandemic. I'm essentially his timekeeper and tutor. He's on lunch break right now, 11:50 to 12:20, and I checked the time to see how long he has left. The time was 12 on the nose. I lit a cigarette, nasty habit people, don't ever start, and reached for my mouse to pull up a tab I have open on my PC. I glanced down at the corner of my screen and nearly fell out of my chair when I saw the time is now 12:15. Naysayers would suggest I spent time daydreaming or had an absent seizure, no to both. I still had a full cigarette in my hand, and I've never had a seizure in my 50 years of life. This is not the first time something odd has happened around me. Twice I have started a pot of coffee only to return to discover a full cup of the precious liquid spread out on the counter. There are no leaks in my carafe or the coffee maker. I've checked multiple times. It was as though someone poured him or herself a cup of coffee without using a cup. Another instance was when my sister and I were on our way home one night after visiting our mom. Oncoming headlights just vanished before reaching us. There was no turnoff on that stretch of road. There was no car pulled over anywhere in that area. It was just gone. This was a while back, so my sister and I believed we had seen a ghost car. Now I believe it was a glitch. These are just a few of the many strange things I have experienced. What if these glitches are universes rubbing against or bumping into each other? What if it's caused by ongoing experiments at CERN or some secret government facility somewhere in the world? What happens if each time they do whatever it is they're doing, another universe forms? Will all these universes collide and become one? What would happen to humanity then? 11. My ex-boyfriend and I were traveling out of the city to have some fun for Halloween. Now, this ride only takes initially an hour and a half to 2 hours to get to and from our destination. We had arrived at our destination safely. Now here is where the glitch begins. We began making our way back to the city we had left, and it was about midnight. We hit this intersection, and I wish I remembered the street names. However, this intersection will be of some importance. On this intersection, he had taken a left, drove a few blocks down, and turned right. We drove past a Tim Hortons and eventually turning off, taking a left, passing a gas station. This should have led us to the highway. As I had my head down on my phone, I began to type when I heard him speak under his breath, "What the f..." Now I focused my attention from my phone to the road and noticed we were back at the same intersection. However, I did not say anything about it. I just shrugged it off as if nothing had happened. This time, instead of taking a left, he went straight and continued forward a few blocks and eventually turned left. This time he had stopped off at a gas station to get some drinks and also to ask for directions to the highway. As he was doing this, I lit a smoke and decided to pop the question. However, I digress. We continued on, and he followed the directions to a T. However, we never made it to the highway. Instead, we found ourselves faced in the opposite direction of the same intersection. My ex-boyfriend beginning to panic. In turn, I accepted it for what it was, and began to calm him down, telling him things like, "Look, just drive, it happened. I know this is not right, but you need to keep driving." He had said fuck this and continued driving away from the highway and straight through the city's core. He began driving around aimlessly without any care for directions. Eventually, we hit this hill driving upward on one long, windy road. Again, my attention was focused on my phone, and to cut this short, we eventually found ourselves driving back up this long, windy road, and with my attention on the road, I could see the sign, "Welcome to Waterloo." Now, how did we even reach a new city, and all the while we were currently in Kitchener, the previous city we were driving in? We never hit any back roads or the highway. As I recall, we were driving through a neighborhood in Kitchener when he turned and we were suddenly driving up a long, windy road. Again, one more attempt, and we found ourselves driving up this long, windy road a third time, after driving around the city. We found ourselves in a series of back roads from here on out, and eventually, finding a city, we stopped for gas and some food. He continued driving, and we found the road back to the city we were trying to reach. At last, what was supposed to be a 2-hour drive max turned into a 6-hour ride. To this day, it leaves me baffled as to how this was even possible. But it happened, and I've decided to share this story here with you. "12. I grew up in a small town in Marietta, Pennsylvania. I've had normal experiences with friends in the woods down by the Susquehanna River, where a lot of Native Americans died living there for hundreds or thousands of years. It's a quiet little town, although not so much anymore. It always felt a little bit off. However, growing up there was always this nice house that sat atop of a hill on a field the neighborhood kids and I always used to play football in. Once I grew older and turned 21, it was beside a road I used to walk up to get alcohol at the local pizzeria, Marco's. The house was never something I didn't pay attention to. I've seen the residents outside. There was an older blue Mustang I presume the father of the household was working on all the time during the summer. They seemed pretty happy. He had a wife and 2 small kids I saw sometimes. The night before things got weird, I was walking up to get some alcohol and stop in for a few drinks, when I vividly remember giving the man a casual nod hello as I walked on up. I don't remember what he was doing, but I do remember he was reaching into his car for something as we made eye contact and nodded. I walked by, on my way back home, and everything was dark there. A blue Mustang in the back driveway, and the other vehicle, a white generic van, was there as well. Nothing out of the ordinary. I walked back down to my house and cracked open my beer in the garage out back, and had a good night listening to the radio and hanging out. The house wasn't in visual sight, but the road was, and I would have noticed anything out of the ordinary. I woke up the next day around the earlier afternoon. I had a typical hangover, and admittedly, I was an alcoholic at the time, so my hangover cure was, well, more booze. I got showered and changed and left my house on that midsummer day on my usual route to Marco's. I put my earbuds in and didn't even pay attention to whether or not a house I always expected to be there existed anymore. I got to Marco's and sat and had a few Jack and Cokes and shot the shit with the regulars like I always did for a few hours. On my way back with my booze to end the night, I didn't have my headphones in and I was feeling a good buzz. I walked down the road by the house like normal until I gazed upon the corner and saw nothing. I was quite perplexed, as one would be in this situation, but what made it worse was the warehouse and medical lab for GlaxoSmithKline. The workers weren't allowed to smoke on the lot, as I already knew from asking long before, so a few of them were standing at the edge of the road there, right next to where the house always was. I looked at them confused, and they gave me confused stares back as I asked, "Wasn't there a house here?" They looked back at me and shrugged, trying to figure out what house I was talking about. There wasn't a patch of dirt where a recently dismantled house might be. It was completely covered in grass. The spot where the foundation would be was just natural with the rest of the hill, like nothing was ever there. Even the 10 feet or so makeshift driveway where their cars parked that was made up of dirt and stones was just a natural patch of grass. The next day I had my mother drive by there with me, and even she couldn't figure out what house I was talking about. Nobody could remember the house being there but me. Unfortunately, I can't find any of the kids I used to play sports in that field with to ask them if they remember. I admit that would be a little weird anyway, so I want to see if there's any way I can prove something weird happened, or disprove myself, because there is a thing our brains do that changes memories, and what we see make more sense. My only problem is I can still remember the feeling that night of knowing it was there the day before. Update. In an interesting turn of events, I have found an old Google Maps Street View that does have the house, but is from 2011, well before the house disappeared, and has cars in the driveway. I can somewhat see the Google Map car didn't go past the house directly, but they're not the vehicles I 100% vividly remember, and I've seen them many times from 2013 until the disappearance. Likely new tenants, or they upgraded their vehicles. Unfortunately, the satellite view is the only thing giving me the latest winter of 2019 view, so I'm still hoping someone knows a way to find clearer cache satellite images from Google Maps, to preferably see around 2014 to 2015, around the time it disappeared. Hopefully some more folks can lead me in the right direction on getting actual proof this house disappeared suddenly, without an explanation. 13. So this happened a couple years ago when my wife and I were living in our first apartment. I still think about it to this day because I was convinced I was going crazy when it happened. So there was this fluffy white cat that would wander around the apartment complex. I would occasionally feed him whenever he was around, so he would often come knock on our door to come inside and hang out for a little bit and bum food off of us. This one day I got back from work, and the cat was waiting on the steps of our building, so I let him in to hang out. Maybe 30 minutes goes by before I decide to take a shower, leaving the cat alone to do whatever. But when I get out of the shower, the cat is nowhere to be found. So being very confused as to what happened to this animal I let inside my home, I start diligently searching for him. This was not a big apartment, but when I say I searched every single square inch of that apartment, I mean it. I checked under our bed and behind couches, and inside the closet and dresser drawers, and the kitchen pantry and cabinets, and even inside the fridge. It was like he completely vanished out of thin air. There was nowhere else he could have been hiding. I was convinced I was going crazy. I started questioning if he was even real, and if I even let him inside. But I had taken a picture of him and sent it to my wife the same day, so he had to be real, right? My wife gets home a couple hours later. I tell her the whole story. but she thinks I'm just messing with her. I've already searched the apartment multiple times now with no cat to be found. So we end up leaving to go out to eat, and by this time I've convinced myself that I let the cat out, and it just blanked from my memory or something. We got back home about an hour later, and again, one last time, I thoroughly check every inch and nook and cranny of the apartment, no cat to be found. So I decided to give up and move on and sit on the couch and watch TV with my wife. This whole ordeal started around 3 in the afternoon, and by this time it's around 8 at night. And then, simply as if nothing happened, out of the corner of my eye I see the cat emerge from the hallway and walk across the living room to the front door. Then I let him back outside. And that's the end of the story. My wife and I were shocked and confused. I still don't know where the hell he could have been hiding, or if he was some kind of shape-shifting weirdo. He did have a lot of personality. 14. For as long as I could remember, my mother has always been known to be highly thoughtful of others near and dear to her. She'll go out shopping for herself and come back with things even for you, just because she felt like you'd like them. One day before work, I met up with her outside her job since she said she had brought me something while she was at the jeweler's. It was an assortment of 4 rings that I still wear to this day, minus one as it ended up being a fake. One of those 3 rings still has me wondering what kind of shit it is on. There have been 3 occasions where I've lost the same one ring, yet always have it come back to me. All of these instances happened earlier this year. First time I had lost it was when I was babysitting. I was cleaning up, throwing things into the trash can when suddenly the ring slips off my finger and right into the crevices of garbage. I literally heard it tinkle far down, but because it's so small, I wasn't even going to waste my time digging through the garbage for it. Fast forward to maybe like a week later when I was getting ready to smoke. I opened the pack the blunt came in, opened my other palm to catch the wrap, just for my ring to fall out of it also. I was so confused yet so happy to see it again, but shrugged it off, because it really didn't make any sense how it would have been there when I'd seen where it had fallen. The second time still has me wondering how it is possible that I found it again. I was doing my hair in front of the bathroom mirror, with the sink water on. I'd collect some water from the faucet to help with styling my hair. Suddenly, the ring slips off and down into the drain. At that point I was really mad because I already lost it one time and felt really lucky to find it. But how in the world would I ever get my ring back this time? I don't even remember for this instance where I found the ring again, because I truly accepted the fact that it was gone and there was no point in looking around for it. But I once again, without explanation, found my ring. The last time I had lost a ring was over at a friend's house. Her parents were out of the city, so I was spending the week with her. Once again, I was in the bathroom doing my hair. Maybe I should steer clear from doing my hair in the bathroom. Same routine going on, but this time, when the ring slips off my finger, I can hear it tinkle off somewhere, possibly on the floor. After searching every nook and cranny, even outside the bathroom into the hallway, thinking it might have fell through onto the floor, I once again just truly accept that it disappeared. About maybe 2 weeks later, I had been gone back home by then, but I went to visit my sister, in-laws and friends. It's around April that it's still kinda cold, so I was wearing my puffer jacket. We were getting ready to smoke, and I remembered I had a lighter in the inner pockets of my jacket. I dug through both of them twice, couldn't find the lighter, but I found my ring. In the jacket I couldn't possibly have put it in when I lost it, because I was half-dressed in someone else's bathroom. As weird as those situations are, I'm not afraid of the damn ring as much as people make it seem like I should be when I tell them this. I just want to know how in the world this simple little gift my mother gave me will go missing and pop up in places it wasn't even near. 15. Throughout my life, I have had more than a few glitches occur. This one happened in fall about 15 years ago. At the time, I was working the graveyard shift at a call center, doing tech support for one of the top computer companies, rhymes with hell. I was a supervisor in training, so I was working alongside an experienced person. It was slow that night, so he told me I could take off early if I wanted. So I packed up my stuff and left. This was around 2 a.m., so I stopped, got an early breakfast and lots of coffee at a 24-hour diner along the way. After that, I was driving down the highway and headed home. about 3 a.m. at this point, when a large part of the sky seemed to burst into flame for a few seconds. There were clouds, but just the small, lazily drifting type, and no weather systems. I checked the local weather when I got home. This was not lightning, and it was above the clouds. Every cloud could be plainly seen during it, and it lasted for a good 5 seconds. The strangest thing about it to me, though, was that it put off no real light, only that part of the sky was illuminated, while everything else on the ground and the rest of the sky was as dark as it should have been. I scoured the internet for the next few days looking for reports of plane crashes or meteors, or anything else that could explain the light, but found nothing. If anyone has any kind of similar experience, I would love to hear about it, and perhaps try to figure out what happened that night. It occurred in a fairly rural part of my state, in a small and sparsely populated county. The light did not fade out, it simply went dark, almost like a switch had been flipped. There was also no accompanying sound, as would be with an explosion or freak thunderstorm. I would assume an explosion large enough to light up nearly half the visible sky would have made significant noise. 16. So everyone has their preference of music, and there are bands which we listen to daily, over and over sometimes. Something rather odd happened, but I was wondering if this has happened to anyone else before as well. I've not told anyone except my best friend, because she was involved in this too. So I discovered a band called Pale Waves after I went to see the 1975 in Houston. They opened for them, like I said. Everyone has their preferences, but me and my best friend, I think, are the only ones who actually listen to them around here. A lot of people probably never heard of them, but I'd say they have a somewhat decent fan base. Anyways, long story short, I went on my Spotify to listen to one of their songs I had stuck in my head, only I could not find them in my playlist. I added most of all their songs on it. So I'm not too weirded out by it yet, and I go and look at their page on Spotify, and it does not exist. Odd, but I thought maybe they removed themselves from Spotify or something. I got on Google to search for them, and there wasn't a trace of them anywhere. No Facebook page, no Spotify, not even Apple Music. So I typed in the lead singer's name and stuff and searched. It seemed she did not exist either. It was like they just went missing from every platform there was. I asked to look them up on my sister's phone, and I got the same results. Same on my laptop as well. It freaked me out a little, so I texted my best friend about it. I said, "Pale Waves does not exist, not even kidding, look it up." My friend texted back saying, "Who?" "The band, the opening act, remember we saw at the show in Houston?" She remembers the 1975 and no Rome performing, but no band called Pale Waves. The whole thing was just odd. I've never mentioned it to anyone except my friend. The day after it happened, I looked them up again, and boom, they were back, all music, videos, pages, everything. Now, maybe they did possibly remove all their stuff for a day, but even so, that's kinda odd to do. The most creepy part about all of this is my shirt. I bought a Pale Waves shirt at the show, black with long sleeves and red writing on it. I wore it 2 days before this happened, only to see it was gone from my dresser, and of course my mom didn't know what shirt I was looking for. And it came back the next day in my dresser drawer. Has anyone ever had something like this happen to them before? Not necessarily like mine, but anything. I wouldn't even know what to call it, but it does seem kind of silly to say all this. I just found it rather strange. To not exist one day and exist the next. 17. Many years ago, my now ex-boyfriend and I were on our way back to my house. I would always have the same argument with him about putting his seatbelt on. As usual, he ignored me and drove without one that night. We arrived at a traffic light and we pulled off when it was green for us. We were hit by a drunk driver who was going at an ungodly speed. His car hit my ex's side, and the car all but stopped resembling a car at that point. It turned into a 3-car pileup, with our car being the first hit. We hit another car beside us in the spin that was caused by the impact, and the drunk driver went on to plow into a second car and bump a third. Here's where it gets weird. It felt like time had legit slowed down. It felt like the car just spun forever, like I was on a merry-go-round. I could also think quite clearly in that space of time, like, we've been hit and I think I'm dead. It was just a very matter-of-fact thing. and it creeps me out at how calm the whole experience was during those prolonged moments. I didn't leave my body or anything, it was just blackness and my thoughts, and the slowed-down sense of time. I wasn't in any pain. Our car finally stopped spinning, and poof, time is running normally again. I was just huddled on the front seat in the fetal position. I do a quick check to make sure I can actually move, and luckily I could. Then my attention goes to my ex. He was wearing his seatbelt. He had absolutely not been wearing it before, I know he wasn't. But there he was, unconscious and bleeding, but strapped into his seatbelt. I had to undo the buckle to help him out of the wreck, with the aid of onlookers who came to help. Everyone survived. I walked away with bruised ribs and a cut from my own seatbelt. My ex fully recovered from his injuries. In fact, no one suffered any major injuries, including the drunk asshat. 18. One night my brother came home from his shift at work, and I could hear him in the living room telling my parents that he got a weird voice message from my sister, and they proceeded to listen to it and discuss it. I was in another room playing a computer game. Once I was able to, I went to the living room to listen. I was wondering what the excitement could be about because they were listening to it on a loop and all talking about this weird message. I wanted to know what was going on. They were having a bit of a laugh. He said she must have had a party and drunk called his phone and left the voicemail rambling. I listened and sure enough it was her, sounding stupid, but there was more. She was just talking and rambling, not really directing a message or asking a request, as could be expected when someone leaves a voicemail. She was just talking about stuff, some personal stuff, including our current family and living situations. Her voice was changing. At one point she sounded happy. Then she began singing some nonsense. She stopped singing to say, "It's cold here," in a very sad tone, and may have been accompanied by some sobs. I don't remember the full extent of the message, but these were the most memorable parts. While my brother and parents found the message quite funny, I found it to be quite unsettling. The sadness, the joy, all the emotions mixed together. It didn't sit right with me. I began to listen to the message over and over, to try figuring it out, as some parts were unintelligible. The more I listened, the more uncomfortable I became. Seeing my growing concern, my mom began to get concerned too. As I said before, we were on a 5 to 6 hour difference, meaning it was somewhere between 2 to 4 a.m. for my sister. An appropriate time for a drunken party or wind down, which corroborates the drunk call idea. Wanted to call my sister to check on her to make sure everything was okay. My dad and brother kept thinking she was just having fun and we should let her sleep. We could call her in the morning. I finally convinced my mom that we should just call her to have a clear conscience. What if she did have a party and things went wrong, and she called us in desperation? We called and my sister picked up. She had been sound asleep and our call woke her up. Naturally, she was scared that we called her at this hour and was thinking some emergency happened. After explaining what was going on, she was confused. There had been no party and no drinking, just a regular weeknight, and she had been comfortably sleeping. I made her listen to the message and she became very uncomfortable too. She recognized the voice as hers, but it didn't make sense as she had been sleeping. Eventually, after everyone agreed that everything was physically fine, she went to get her dogs to sleep in the room with her, as she had become pretty unsettled by that point. The next day, we continued to investigate. My brother had no record of the incoming call on his phone, despite having the voice message obviously saved. His cell phone provider wasn't of very much assistance. They were unable, possibly unwilling, to pull up incoming calls for the time period. Things didn't get any better as my sister confirmed that there were no outgoing calls made on her end. Not only that, my brother had recently changed phones and carriers and had a new number which she didn't even have yet. We were left without an explanation. Some people said that it was probably some female acquaintance of my brother playing a prank. I didn't believe that, though. I recognized my sister's voice, and some of the things she said didn't seem that they would be knowledge some female friend of his would have. As mentioned before, the voice was hers, happy voice, sad voice, regular voice. All hers without skipping a beat. I do not also believe that it was a prank played by my brother and sister either, not counting the fact that my sister is not at all the sort of person who plays pranks on people. Whenever this call gets brought up, there is an immediate unsettling atmosphere felt by everyone involved. Obviously the phone and the message on it are long gone. I had saved it onto my computer and would occasionally listen to it later on. Again, this is also destroyed and long gone. I'll never know what the hell happened. 19. I currently live by myself in a smallish apartment. No pets, no kids, no visitors. If I recall correctly, the building itself is about 10 years old and well maintained. I think that it's largely made out of masonry blocks. I say this because it's not some creepy old wooden structure that's about to fall down. But since I've moved in, I've had the following things happen to me. Random popping noises. It's just the building settling, would be the normal explanation, except it occurs semi-regularly at all hours, and never in the room I'm currently occupying. If I'm in the bedroom, it's in the living room. If I'm in the living room, the noises come from the bedroom, bathroom, or kitchen. Also, as stated, the structure is largely brick and not wooden. I'm used to house-settling noises, and these don't sound the same. Very similar, but not the same. I have 2 jars of peanut butter. That's not so strange. Except I only bought one. The receipt only shows one. I only grabbed one off the shelf. Yet when I was putting the groceries away, there were 2 identical brand new jars of peanut butter. People, children, walking, playing around upstairs. There is no upstairs. This is the top floor and there's a hatch on the roof in the common hallway. The roof is also peaked tile. Nobody is going walking up there for fun. The walls are good and solid, so the only time I really hear the neighbors is when they're hanging pictures or talking loudly in the hallway. Hearing what sometimes sounds like kids playing upstairs, definitely not downstairs, is unsettling. Bread clip on the couch today, again, sounds mundane. Except this is an IKEA sofa, with one long cushion to sit on and not multiple cushions. So, there is nowhere for a bread clip to hide in. I haven't opened a bag of bread in days. My pockets haven't held anything but my phone in days. I've been sitting on the couch, off and on for days with no issue. Yet when I went to lie down on the couch, there was a bread clip poking me in the hips. The clip was exactly where I had been sitting earlier. It also didn't come from beneath the back cushions because I have a brush I really like, or liked. Last I used it was while sitting on the couch about a week ago. Since then I can't find it. I've looked literally everywhere for it. I've even pulled the couch cushions multiple times, I think the last time was a day or 2 ago, to check just in case. It's not in any pockets. It's not in or on my nightstand, not in my desk, nowhere. It's just gone. Missing matches. Maybe. I wanted to light a candle a few weeks ago, but my box of matches has just up and disappeared as well. It's entirely possible that this is on me, because a matchbox is pretty small and is easier to misplace than a brush is. It may still be lurking in the back of a drawer that I just haven't emptied out yet. There is more that I'm probably not remembering right now. The apartment is very nice at first glance, but also feels quite creepy for at least these reasons. Update. Another weird thing just happened. It sounded like someone was tearing a long strip of some kind of paper above my head. As in someone actually in the apartment, but again, I am alone here. I found the matches. They were right where I left them, in a place that I'd already searched at least twice before. Either I was blind the first few times or they came back. I hope my brush comes back. For the past couple of days, the noise of footsteps and running has been almost constant, but with the occasional loud thud. Last night it continued until at least 2 a.m. For about 12 hours yesterday, it actually sounded like somebody trying to get out of the tub. You know the thuds someone makes when they are getting out of the tub but slip on a wet surface as they do so? Yeah. Constant but not regular for 8 to 12 hours. I tried to record the sound, but alas, my phone's microphone isn't sensitive enough. The best I've got is a 30-second clip where you can just barely hear 2 thuds if you turn the volume up all the way. 20. So a bit about me. I'm from the Bay Area in California. And when I was younger, no male or female in my age group was even remotely interested in me. It wasn't until university that people became interested in me romantically or physically. All this is to say I had no experience with relationships, dating, courting, or whatever. Also, when I was younger, I just always knew that I was going to live in Britain. I have no family there. I had never even visited. and I don't have any British heritage. But for some reason I just knew it was going to happen. So much so that when I was 16 or 17, I forced myself to start drinking tea, even though I hated it because I knew it would come in handy one day. Anyway, it was weird when I started getting these really strong feelings about certain types of traits, or that I would see reflected in certain people on TV. When I was maybe 12, I started getting really strong feelings about men with brown hair and green eyes. I know that sounds weird, but it wasn't like it was a preference. It felt like it was going to be someone very significant in my life with that specific characteristic. When I was about 14, I was watching the British TV series Misfits, highly recommend, and one of the new characters came in one of the seasons, and I thought, this feels much more accurate. It was a character called Rudy, played by the actor Joseph Gilgan, and I wasn't particularly attracted to him, but his characteristics felt as if they aligned with this person I was going to be with more accurately. I started telling my close friends that one day. I can't explain why, but I would be with someone who had brown hair, green eyes, was a musician, and I also had a feeling his name would be Liam. I knew this would be my very first serious live-in relationship, but I also had a feeling it wouldn't be my final one. I can't explain it, but I also knew that I would be with someone with brown and hazel eyes, dirty, blonde, slightly curly hair from the south of England, whose name started with the letter J, or was J, and that would likely be my last relationship. He'd be the one. Fast forward to 19 years old, I was at university in Southern California, and I wasn't happy with my degree in music that I was doing at a conservatory. I decided to look at popular music universities in the UK, and long story short, I made the move, and I've been here since 2014. During my third year, a guy from my class moved into my house share named Will. I wasn't particularly attracted to him. He was cute, but something just drew me to him. I have always had really strong feelings about people that I need to have in my life, and he was one of those very strong gut feelings. Long story short, he has green eyes, brown hair, and is a professional drummer from Lancashire. And I later realized that Liam is the latter half of William. Over that year, living together in the house share, we fell in love and moved in together following our degree. We lived together till we amicably broke up in May last year. Following our breakup, I decided to dive back into the dating scene pretty quickly. I went to an outdoor festival in July with some friends, and I noticed a guy from across the massive outdoor space who was just mesmerizing to me. And I felt a very strong pull towards this random stranger. I decided to push it out of my mind, but a couple hours later, my friend group joined with that guy's friend group. We hit it off immediately, and started dating pretty shortly after. He has dirty blonde, slightly curly hair, brown hazel eyes, is from Kent in England, and his name is James. We now live together, and we are very much in love, and I very much think he's the one. This shit is wild. I have no idea how to explain this, and it freaks me out. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Glitch Monthly number 14. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. I'd like to give a shout out, if I may, to the author of the last story there, Reddit user Sola Music. They are also an electronic R&B artist operating under the name Sola. Songs they recommend are Self-Destructing and Closure. And in fact, if you search Sola Music on YouTube with either of those, you will find their channel. And you can check out the music. Apologies for the sound of any dogs or birds or whatever the hell. I don't know why, but every noise seemed to be happening at once. I cut most of them out, but if anything snuck through, I was getting deluged by noise. Also not feeling very well right now. I'm hoping it's not the dreaded sickness, because I barely leave the house. I mean, I've been out in the past month. I think I've been out maybe 2 trips out in the past month. And I'm always very cautious. So hopefully it's just my usual health-related nonsense. It could be, because I felt something sneaking up for a while, so it could just be that. And hopefully that's all it is. Right, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.